nuclear weapons. Drop an actual nuke on your soldiers. Disregard for human life, crime against humanity. Greedy f***s in the government, and good guys indeed. Imagine you're just a Soviet soldier sometime in the 50s doing military exercises with the boys when suddenly a nuke goes off at the horizon. This, of course, is no coincidence. The government is putting on a show and you're the main guest. When the Soviet Union obtained its nuclear weapons in 1949, much earlier than its competitors were expecting it to, the US has realized that it couldn't just shake its nuclear knapsack over the rest of the world anymore without it being swiftly kicked by the Soviet nuclear boot. And while neither side was exactly planning to plant some nuclear mushrooms in their neighbor's garden, such an outcome was still very much within the realm of possibility. The experience from the First and Second World Wars has taught all the countries in the world that breaking a well-prepared fortified line of defense was a very costly endeavor, both in human resources, ammunition, armor, you name it. Well, turns out there is an answer for that, and that answer is tactical nuclear weapons. Tactical nukes are typically within the range of kilotons to tens of kilotons in TNT equivalent. They can also be geometrically smaller, sometimes even able to be fired by normal artillery. Okay, so in theory, tactical nukes could be used to breach fortifications. But what about practice? How do you prepare for such an operation? Well, you do a military exercise where you imitate a nuclear explosion and then move your troops through the blast radius while making sure they all coordinate properly. Or, if you are Soviet Union, you just go straight past the imitation stage and just drop an actual nuke on your soldiers. And that was exactly what they did at the Totsk military test site in 1954. With about 44,000 troops involved, as well as a shitload of tanks, aviation and artillery, they have dropped a 40-kiloton bomb on the test site. Immediately after the detonation, artillery and aviation start shelling the area, while the troops move in on foot and armored vehicles on the ground towards the ground zero. Soldiers on the ground had to walk on a thin layer of glass freshly formed by the explosion, all while the bombers in the sky had to fly directly through the mushroom cloud. Such disregard for human life was unfortunately tragically common in the Soviet Union and drew great criticism in the Western countries, where, human rights were a thing and such an event was absolutely inconceivable. Is what I would have said if the US hasn't done the exact same thing. And unlike the Soviets, who have only done it once, the US has performed such tests multiple times. The series of exercises, codenamed Desert Rock, numbered 1 to 8, was performed at the Nevada test site and involved 10,000s of soldiers, armor, aviation, artillery, you know the drill by now. In addition to just normal troop movements, they also had separate groups whose entire purpose was just to record reaction of soldiers to witnessing a nuclear blast. Even crazier is that you can see in the footage that the soldiers aren't actually wearing any kind of protective gear, just their normal uniforms, while walking directly towards the blast site. And with those US-based exercises, the cherry on top is that those were not even in response to the Soviets. The US has actually started earlier than the Soviets in 1951. Good guys indeed. This story really once again confirms the old truth that all sides in the Cold War were massive assholes keen on world domination. Make no mistakes, whichever side performed these tests, they are either way a crime against humanity. I remember one particular scene from a documentary where a soldier asks their briefing officer whether they will receive a dangerous dose of radiation, and the officer basically goes, "No mate, you good." And exactly because of lying fucks like this, both in the military and the government, tens of thousands of perfectly fine young men had to become involuntary lab rats for those greedy fucks in the government planning to take over the world. And all for testing weapons that no one even wanted to use in the first place. Or so they say. But that's enough for today. We don't want too many feels, do we? Oh, would you look at that? This is my last video. Less feels, more fun. A wonky metro system built in Berlin in the 80s. Never heard of that before. Wonder what it's all about. You know what you have to do.